That night, the Seattle rain came down, like it wanted to tear the lake apart. An armored car flew off the shoreline road, gunfire chewing the dark behind it, and the black water swallowed 2 tons of steel, like it was swallowing a pebble. Up on the road, men stood still in the rain. They didn't fire again. They just watched the tislights sink beneath the surface, calm, like they were watching television. Somebody was drowning down there, and nobody was going to save him. But Lake Washington keeps secrets men think they've drowned. Because some things don't die the way people believe they do. Some bloodlines are worth more than an empire. And tonight, on a muddy slope a few dozen feet away, a girl with nothing left to lose just put her hand on a door handle. She didn't know what she was about to pull out of that water. She only knew this. The world has a strange way of putting good people in bad places. The rain came down like it had a grudge, not soft, not gentle, the kind of rain that finds every crack in a windshield and every hole in a soul. December in Seattle, midnight on the 14th, and the cold had teeth. Delphine Ward sat in the driver's seat of a 1998 Honda Civic that hadn't run in 6 days. Wrapped in 3 blankets, all of them from a thrift store on Rainier Avenue, all of them smelling faintly of mothballs and other people's lives. She was 22 years old, and she had $14 to her name, 14. She'd counted it 3 times, because counting gave her hearse and something to do, and because maybe if she counted slow enough, the number would grow. It didn't. The car was parked near the tree line at the edge of Seward Park, illegally. She knew it was illegal. She also knew the cops didn't come out this far on a night like this. Nobody did, which was exactly why she chose it. Her breath fogged the glass. She wiped it with the back of her sleeve, and through the smear she watched the black water of Lake Washington move under the rain. Slow. Heavy. Like it was thinking about something. Her mother used to say water remembers things. Her mother used to say a lot of things. Diane Ward had died in a hospital bed at Virginia Mason 14 months ago. Aggressive. That was the word the doctors kept using. Aggressive lymphoma. As if the cancer had a personality. As if it wanted the fight. And it won. It won the house in Ballard. It won their savings. It won the little garden Diane kept out back with the tomatoes that never quite ripened. It won everything, except Delphine. The cancer didn't get her. The bills did the rest. And now here she was, in a dead car, in the dark, with $14 and a heater that clicked but didn't blow. She wasn't crying. She'd stopped crying somewhere back in the spring. Crying cost energy, and energy cost calories, and calories cost money. So no, she just watched the water, and she waited for morning, because morning was free. A knock on the window nearly stopped her heart. She jumped, twisted, and there was a face pressed close to the glass. Old, weathered, a gray beard soaked flat against a jaw, and 2 eyes she'd know anywhere. Odell. She rolled the window down 2 inches. That was all it would go anymore. "You'll catch your death out here," the old man said. "You first," she said back. Odell Pruitt grinned, and where 2 of his teeth should have been there was just dark. He was maybe 70, maybe older. He didn't know himself, he claimed. Said the DMV lost his birth certificate back when Nixon was president, and he'd never bothered to fix it. He used to own a garage, a real one. Pruitt's Automotive over on Delridge. Fixed transmissions for 30 years until his knees gave out, and the bank gave up on him. Now he slept under the picnic shelter across the lot, and he called it his summer home. Even in December, even in the rain, brought you something, he said. He pushed a paper bag through the 2-inch gap. It was warm. Barely, what is it? Half a meatball sub. Fella at the deli was going to throw it out. Delphine held the bag against her chest, felt the warmth bleed through the paper into her fingers. And something in her throat went tight. Because it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her all week. "You already eat?" she asked. "I had mine," Odell lied. She knew he was lying. He always lied about that, and she let him. Because that was the deal between them. He fed her, and she pretended to believe him. It was the only family arrangement she had left. "Get some sleep, kid," he said, patting the roof of the car twice. "Supposed to break by dawn, Odell." He stopped. "Thank you." He waved it off like it was nothing. Like half a sandwich wasn't the difference between a bearable night and a broken one. And then he shuffled off into the dark, toward his summer home. His shoulders hunched against the rain. She watched him go, and she thought, not for the first time, that the world had a strange way of putting good people in bad places. Then she ate, slow, making it last. She had just wrapped the last third back up to save for breakfast when the headlights came. They came wrong. That was the first thing she noticed. Not that they were bright. Headlights were always bright. But these were moving wrong. Too fast, swerving. Cutting through the black like something was chasing them. Or like something was inside them. Screaming, she sat up. The blanket slid off her shoulders and she didn't feel the cold. Because down on Lake Washington Boulevard, where no car should be doing more than 30, a machine was coming. Big. Black. Armored. Later. Much later. She'd learned the name. Mercedes Maybach S600 Guard. A car that cost more than every house on the block she grew up on. Combined, a car built to stop bullets, except tonight the bullets were winning, 'cause behind it, riding its bumper, close enough to kiss, were two matte black SUVs with their headlights off, running dark, hunting. And that's when she heard it. Not thunder, gunfire, a crack. Sharp and flat and final, the sound a rifle makes when it means it. And the Maybach's front tire came apart in a spray of rubber and sparks. Delphine's hand found the door handle. She didn't decide to. Her hand just did it. The armored car fishtailed. 2 tons of steel suddenly weightless. It hit the guardrail. And the guardrail, reinforced steel bolted into concrete, snapped like it was made of breadsticks. There was a groan of metal, a shriek, and then nothing held it anymore. Gravity took the car. It went over the embankment nose first, and it hit the lake with a sound she felt in her ribs. A boom. A white eruption of water that climbed into the rain and hung there for half a second before it fell. Then the water started swallowing it. Up on the road, the 2 SUVs skidded to a stop. Doors opened, boots hit pavement, and flashlights, hard white flashlights, began sweeping down toward the water. Delphine dropped. She didn't think about it. She was out of the car and down in the mud and pressed flat behind a cluster of evergreens before her brain caught up with her body. Her heart was a fist against her ribs. Because up there, on the road, were men, and the men had rifles, and the rifles were pointed at the water. Let it sink, a voice. Low. Gravel over broken glass. She'd learn that name too eventually. Barrett Klein. A man who hurt people for a living and slept fine at night. Nothing survives that water, the voice said. Not even him. And they didn't shoot again. That was the thing that turned her stomach. They didn't need to. They just stood there, in the rain, and watched the taillights of a sinking car go dim beneath the surface. Watched a man drown. Like it was television, then the taillights vanished, and the men, satisfied, climbed back into their trucks and drove away. And the night went quiet, just the rain, just the lake, just Delphine Ward, alone on a muddy slope, staring at the spot where a car full of somebody had gone under. She should have stayed put. Every rule of survival she'd learned in 14 months on the street screamed it. Stay put. Keep your head down. This is not your problem. You have $14 and no future, and you cannot afford to make anything your problem. Except somebody was down there, somebody was dying down there, right now. In the cold and the dark, alone. The way her mother had almost died, alone. If Delphine hadn't been there to hold her hand, and she thought about Odell, handing her a warm sandwich through a 2-inch gap. For nothing. For no reason except that a person shouldn't be cold and hungry if you can help it. The world puts good people in bad places, and sometimes a good person has to decide whether to stay good. She threw off the blankets. The rain hit her like a slap, instant, soaking, and she was already moving, sliding down the embankment on her heels, toward the water, toward the black, and her mind was screaming the whole way down. This is insane, which it was. You're going to die, which she might. The water's 38 degrees and you'll seize up in 90 seconds, which... Yeah, she knew. She hit the shoreline, and the mud grabbed her shoes, and she kept going anyway. Because if she stopped to think, she'd stop for good. And there wasn't time to stop for good. She waded into her knees. The cold was a lie her body couldn't process. Not cold like winter, cold like a wall, cold like a hand closing around her legs and squeezing the warmth out through her skin. She gasped. Couldn't help it. And then she dove. And the lake took her whole. The shock drove the air out of her lungs in a single silver burst. Thousands of needles, all at once, everywhere. Her chest locked, her heart stuttered, and for a moment, one long terrible moment, her whole body simply refused. Move, move, move. She forced her eyes open. The water was black and stinging and full of silt. But there, below her, a faint glow, dashboard lights, still burning, green and ghostly. The Maybach was sinking nose down into the muck, sinking slow, but sinking sure. And she kicked toward it. Every kick cost her. Her muscles were already going stupid with cold. already forgetting how to be muscles. But she reached the driver's just office, and she scraped her palms along the hull until she found the window, and through the warped glass she saw him, a man, a big man, even slumped over the wheel, even out cold, even with the water climbing up his chest. He was huge, broad through the shoulders in a way that a gray suit could not hide. A suit that probably cost more than the car she was drowning next to. She pounded the glass, nothing. He didn't move, didn't twitch, didn't do the thing that unconscious people do in movies where they suddenly wake up and help you. He just sat there, sinking, and the glass, cracked and spiderwebbed from the bullets, bowed inward under the pressure, but it held. Her lungs were burning now, screaming. That deep animal scream that means you have seconds. Not minutes, seconds. She shoved off the car and clawed for the surface and broke it with a sound that was half gasp and half sob. Rain in her face. Air in her lungs, sweet, burning. Not enough. She looked around, wild, desperate, and she saw it. Half buried in the shallows, a length of guardrail sheared off jagged when the car went through. Heavy, metal. She grabbed it, dragged it, and she filled her lungs one more time. Then she went back down into the dark. Her mother's voice was in her head now, which made no sense. But it was there anyway, soft. From a long time ago, from before the hospital. From a kitchen in Ballard with tomatoes that never ripened. "You've got more fight in you than sense," Delphine warned. "Mama. Always did Mama." She reached the window, braced her feet against the sinking hull, and she swung the metal bar with everything she had left, which wasn't much. But it was enough. Crack the glass gave. It didn't break clean. It imploded. A rush of freezing water pouring into the cabin, and a cloud of glass shards spinning in the current like tiny knives. And she reached in, bare-armed, blind. Feeling for the man, the glass caught her forearm. A jagged edge opened her skin from wrist to elbow. Deep, a hot line of pain that even the cold couldn't hide. And her blood, dark in the black water, curled out in a ribbon and drifted up toward the dying dashboard light. She didn't stop. She got a hand on his shoulder, and he was. God, he was like stone. Not a man's weight, a statue's weight, 200 pounds of it, maybe more. Held fast by a seatbelt that crossed his chest like a chain, her fingers found the buckle, numb, clumsy. Fumbling over the release, her lungs folding in on themselves, her vision starting to gray at the edges. The way a TV grays when you unplug it. Press. Just press the button. Press it. Complicate, the belt let go, and she pulled. She hauled him through the shattered window by the shoulders and the collar, and sheer refusal to quit. And then she was kicking upward. One arm hooked under his heavy jaw, dragging a dead man toward a surface she could no longer see. The swim-up was a nightmare with no bottom and no top. Her legs had stopped listening. Her lungs had stopped asking. There was only the cold and the dark and the terrible weight of him and one thought. One single thought, left in the whole gray world. Up, up, up. They broke the surface together, and she screamed. Not words at first, just sound. Just the raw animal noise of his body remembering it was alive. Then, choking, coughing, half-drowned, help. Nobody answered. She knew nobody would. Somebody, help me. The shore was 20 feet away. It might as well have been 20 miles. But she went, one arm under his jaw, the other clawing at the water, kicking legs that didn't work, and inch by inch, foot by foot. She dragged 200 pounds of dead billionaire toward the rocks. Her feet finally found the bottom. She stood, wobbled, and pulled him the last few feet up onto the muddy shore, and then her body simply quit. She dropped beside him, face in the mud, chest heaving, coughing up lake water, shaking so hard her teeth clicked like a telegraph. For a moment, that was all she could do. Lie there, bleed, freeze, breathe. But the man beside her wasn't breathing, and that got her moving again. She crawled to him, pushed herself up on shaking arms, and got her first real look at his face in the gray light. And even half-drowned, even scared out of her mind, some detached corner of her brain noticed. He was beautiful, sharp cheekbones, a jaw like something carved, dark hair plastered flat. He looked like the kind of man who belonged behind a wall of security and glass, not lying in the mud at the feet of a homeless girl who'd fished him out of a lake. But he was pale, too pale. Not fainting pale, not cold pale, alabaster, bloodless, the color of something that had never had a pulse at all. She just pressed 2 fingers to his throat. Nothing, she moved them. Pressed harder. Searched the side of his neck for the beat that had to be there. That was always there, in every living thing. Nothing. No breath at his lips, no rise in his chest, no pulse under her fingers. Nothing at all. He was dead. He was completely, absolutely, unmistakably dead. And something inside Delphine Ward cracked right down the middle. Because she'd done it. She'd actually done it. She dove into a freezing lake at midnight and cut her arm open, and nearly drowned twice and dragged 200 pounds of stranger up a muddy hill. For a corpse, for nothing. No, she said, out loud, to the rain, to the dark, to him. No, no, no. Come on. She put her hands on his chest, stacked them. The way they teach you in the video they make you watch for a minimum wage job you'll never keep. And she pushed. His chest didn't move. She pushed harder, leaned her whole weight into it. And it was like pressing on marble, on granite, on the hood of a car. His ribs didn't give a millimeter. His body was denser than any body had a right to be. Heavier, harder. Wrong. That's not possible. She pushed again anyway. Breathe, she gasped. Breathe. Damn it, breathe. Nothing. She pinched his nose, tilted his head back, and leaned down to force air into lungs that would not take it. And as she leaned over his still, cold, perfect face, her wounded arm hovered above his mouth. And a single drop of blood fell, one drop, bright red, heavy. It slid off the torn edge of her forearm and fell through the rain and landed on his pale, parted lips. And the world stopped making sense because the blood didn't sit there. It didn't run. It didn't drip. It absorbed, like his skin was dry ground, and her blood was the first rain in 100 years. It just drank, down, gone. As if it had never fallen at all, Delphine froze. Every hair on her body stood up, and then he moved. A tremor, violent, racking his whole massive frame from the boots up. His back arched off the mud, and his eyes snapped open. She scrambled backward, a scream trapped in her throat and no air to push it out. Because his eyes were not human eyes. The irises burned, glowing, a deep and terrible crimson, like coals in the belly of a dying fire, like something looking out at her from a place she was never meant to see. She got a foot under herself, started to run. She was fast. He was faster. She didn't even see him move. 1 second, he was flat on his back in the mud. The next, his hand was around her wounded forearm, and the grip, God. The grip was like a machine closing, like a car door, like industrial steel. She couldn't have pulled free if she'd had 10 of her. But he didn't yank her down. He didn't lunge for her throat. He looked at her arm, at the wound, at the blood still welling from the long, jagged cut. And his crimson eyes fixed on it with a hunger so total, so ancient, that it stopped her heart more surely than the cold had. Corwin. His voice came out of him like something dragged up from underground. Deep, guttural, wrong in the chest. She didn't understand, Corwin Vane. He said a name. He was telling her his name, as if that meant anything, as if a name was the thing to lead with. Here now, in the mud, with the rain and the blood in his impossible glowing eyes. He pulled her arm toward his face. No, she said, finally, the scream breaking loose as a whisper. No, please, let me go. Please. He didn't listen. His mouth opened, and she watched. Frozen, paralyzed. Every nerve in her body lit up with an ancient animal terror. She watched 2 fangs descend from his upper jaw. Long, white, perfect. Curving to a point sharper than the glass that had opened her arm. This isn't real. Vampires aren't real. They're stories. Movies. Halloween. This isn't. This can't. This. He didn't tear into her. That was the part she'd never be able to explain. Not later. Not to anyone. He didn't rip. Didn't bite. Instead, he pressed his cold, hard mouth directly over the wound. Gentle, almost, and his tongue passed once across the torn edges of her skin, and the world changed. The instant his mouth touched her blood, a wave crashed through her. Not pain. The opposite of pain. A rush of pure heat that started at her arm and flooded everywhere at once. The cold vanished, just the needles, the shaking, the bone-deep ache of the freezing lake. Gone, replaced by a warmth so total, so intoxicating, that her head rolled back and her eyes fluttered and every muscle in her body went slack. It felt like being held. It felt like the first warm day after the longest winter. It felt like a lie her body wanted to believe. He drank. Only a little. Only a few mouthfuls. She felt it leaving her, and she couldn't have stopped it, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. And then, as suddenly as he'd taken her, he let go. She dropped back into the mud, gasping, reeling, her mind spinning like a wheel off its axle. And she looked at her arm. She made herself look at her arm. The wound was gone. Not scabbed, not closed. Gone. The skin was smooth, whole, unbroken, wrist to elbow. Nothing left but a smear of her own blood to prove there'd ever been a cut at all. What? She breathed. What are you? And she looked up at him, and he was changing, right there, in front of her. The deathly gray was draining out of his skin and color was pouring in behind it. Rich, living color, warmth in a face that had been a corpse's face 30 seconds ago. And then a sound filled the air between them. Low, slow, powerful, a heartbeat, his heartbeat. Deep as a bass drum, steady, growing stronger with each beat, a sound she'd searched his throat for and hadn't found. And now it was here, thundering back to life. The lake water in his lungs came out of him as steam. It rolled off his shoulders in the cold air, and he rose. He didn't struggle up the way a man does. He simply stood. One motion, fluid, enormous. And he kept going up and up until he towered over her. 6'4" of him, maybe more, broad and dark and dripping. A ruined gray suit hanging off a body that no longer looked remotely dead. He wiped a streak of her blood from his chin with his thumb, and he looked at it, and then he looked at her, and his eyes, as she watched, cooled. The burning crimson faded, bled away, settling into a deep, striking amber, warmer, but no less terrible. Because there was something in those amber eyes that no human being should carry. Something old. Something that had watched centuries go by and hadn't blinked. "Who sent you?" he said. His voice was different now. Not the underground growl. Smooth, level, quiet, and somehow the quiet was worse. Nobody, she stammered. She was crab-walking backward through the mud, away from him. "I live in my car, right up there. I saw you crash. I pulled you out." He tilted his head, studying her. And she had the horrible sense that he was listening to something. Not her words, something underneath her words. The frantic hammer of her own heart, maybe. The rush of blood in her ears. "You broke through guarded glass," he said slowly. "Underwater. Armored glass, rated to stop a rifle round. You broke through it, and you pulled me ashore. Alone. Yes. Tears now, hot on her cold face, indistinguishable from the rain. You were dead. You didn't have a pulse. You. What are you?" He opened his mouth to answer, and that's when she heard the engines, high, sharp. The scream of powerful motors coming back down Lake Washington Boulevard, and headlights swung across the trees above them. Once, twice, 3 sets. Corwin's head turned toward the road, and every trace of the man vanished. What was left was the predator. "Check the shoreline," a voice barked from up on the road. That same voice, gravel over glass. "Barrett Klein. If he floated up, burn the body." Corwin looked back down at her, and she saw his jaw tighten. The muscles in his neck stood out like cables. And when he spoke, his voice had gone cold in a new way. "A final way. They will kill you," he said, "just for seeing me." "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "In my world," he said, "innocence is a liability," and then he moved. She didn't have time to argue, didn't have time to run. Didn't have time to do anything but gasp as he bent down and scooped her off the ground like she weighed nothing at all. Like she was a coat, a bag, a nothing. And he threw her over one enormous shoulder. "Wait," she got out, pounding a fist against his back. Put me down. Who are? Hold your breath." That was all he said. Up on the road, silenced gunfire began to chew through the trees where her Honda sat, where she'd been sitting 10 minutes ago. Bark exploded. Mud jumped. The little dead car took a stitching line of holes across its rusted door, but by then, they were already gone. The world became a smear. She'd never known anything could move that fast. Not a car, not a train, nothing. The force of it pressed her flat against his shoulder and drove the air from her lungs and turned the whole dark forest into a single-streaked tunnel of black and gray and rain. Trees she should have hit went by like fence posts. Ravines she should have fallen into passed beneath them in a single impossible bound. Fallen logs the size of buses. Gone. Man. She squeezed her eyes shut and held her breath like he'd told her, because there was nothing else to do. Because the rules were all broken now. He didn't stop until the sirens and the shouting were miles behind them. Deep in the trees. High in the hills. Where no road went. He set her down inside the hollow of an ancient cedar. A tree so old and so vast that its trunk had gone hollow with the centuries and left a dry cave inside, floored with soft dead needles, roofed with living wood. Dry, sheltered. She collapsed onto the needles, clutching her chest, hyperventilating. Vampires weren't real. They were myths. Stories told to children. Hollywood makeup and rubber teeth. She knew this. She had always known this. It was one of the small, solid facts you built a life on. The sun rises. Water is wet. The dead stay dead. And vampires are. Not real except the man standing in the mouth of the hollow, blocking out what little gray light there was. With his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dark like a cat's. Was breathing proof that at least one small, solid fact she built her life on was a lie. "You're a monster," she breathed. It wasn't an accusation. It was almost a question, as if she were asking him to please. Please, tell her she was wrong. He didn't tell her she was wrong. He crouched down in front of her instead. Slow, his huge frame folding down to her level. And he reached out one cold finger and tipped her chin up until she had no choice but to look into those impossible eyes. I am the king, he said quietly, of a world you did not know existed 20 minutes ago. She couldn't breathe, and right now, he went on, and his voice dropped lower, softer, and somehow that made it land harder. My blood is running through your veins. Which means they are not just hunting me anymore. He paused. Outside, the rain fell on 1,000,000 cedar needles and made no sound at all. They are hunting you, and Delphine Ward, 22 years old, $14 to her name, sat in the hollow of a 1,000-year-old tree, miles from the dad car that was the closest thing she had to a home, and understood, all at once, in the marrow of her bones, that the girl who dove into that lake was never coming back out, and somewhere far below, back down in the drowned dark of the city, an old man under a picnic shelter woke to the wail of sirens, and he looked out at the empty spot in the parking lot, where a rusted Honda had sat every night for a month, and it was gone, and the girl was gone, and Odell Pruitt pushed himself up on his bad knees, and he stared into the rain, and he called her name into the dark, and nobody answered. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't the only one out there in the dark, watching that empty space where the girl used to be. Dawn came gray to Seattle, no warmth in it, no gold. Just a thin, cold light seeping up behind the mountains and turning the mist the color of dishwater. The kind of morning that doesn't so much arrive leak. Delphine Ward woke on a leather sofa that cost more than the car she used to sleep in. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Which was normal. She hadn't known where she was in a lot of mornings lately. But this was a new kind of not knowing. Because the ceiling above her was concrete, reinforced, 40 feet up, and the walls were lined with servers that blinked and hummed in the dark like a nest of quiet machines. She sat up fast, the cashmere blanket slid off her shoulders. Cashmere. She knew it was cashmere the way you know things you've only ever touched in a store, put back, and she pulled it around herself again anyway. Because the room was cold, and because it was the softest thing that had touched her skin in over a year. She remembered all of it, the lake, the cold, the man, the fangs. The way her arm had healed under his mouth like a film run backward. None of it had been a dream, which was somehow the worst part. The bunker went on and on. She'd learn later it was buried under a decommissioned Boeing hangar out near the airfield. But right now it was just a cave full of impossible things. Racks of weapons on one wall. Actual weapons, the kind soldiers carry. And leaning against the concrete beside them, casual as umbrellas by a door, were paintings. Old paintings, gold-framed. The kind that live behind glass with guards, just propped there, gathering dust. And across the room, his back to her, was him, Corwin Vane. He'd changed out of the ruined suit. Black tactical pants now. A fitted black shirt stretched across shoulders that looked carved out of the same stone as the walls. He had a phone pressed to his ear. Something small and black and probably worth more than her mother's whole hospital bill. He was speaking low. And every word landed like a dropped knife. Klein missed, he said. A pause. I want Aegis Defense Solutions gone by midnight. Buy the shell companies, liquidate the assets, and find out which seat on the High Council paid for the hit. Another pause. Yes, all of it. Burn it down, Callahan. He lowered the phone. He turned around, and his eyes weren't glowing anymore. They were just amber now. Just warm brown gold in the gray light. But there was a weight behind them that made her breath snag in her throat. Because those were not young eyes. They were not even old eyes. They were eyes that had watched a very long time and forgotten how to be surprised by anything. Until, maybe last night, you're awake, he said. I noticed. He almost smiled. The corner of his mouth. Barely, you're calm, he said. For a woman who found out last night that vampires run the private military industry. I've had a strange couple of years. He crossed the room. He didn't walk like a man walks. There was no bounce in it. No sound. He moved the way water moves. And he sat down. Not on the sofa. On the glass coffee table right in front of her knees. Close, too close. And she pressed back into leather and refused to look away from him, because looking away felt like turning your back on a lion. I watched my mother die, she said. 3 years. Lymphoma. I watched a hospital in this city bill us into the street while she was still breathing. Monsters in suits, I know. Fangs are just a new outfit that got him. She saw it land. Something flickered behind the amber. Corwin, he said. My name, not Mr. Vane. Corwin, I know your name. You said it while you were dead. I did, he said. I don't usually introduce myself before I've finished coming back to life. You bring it out in a man. And she almost laughed, which terrified her, because you're not supposed to almost laugh at the monster. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and his cool hand wrapped around her wrist, the same arm. The one the glass had opened, the one that was smooth now, whole, and the touch sent a Schulte truck through her that she felt in her back teeth. Your mother's debt is gone, he said. She went still. As of about 10 minutes ago, he said, every dollar you owed Virginia Mason is paid, in full. The collection agencies, the Leesons, gone, and the bank that took your mother's house in Ballard. He paused. I bought the bank. The house is yours again. It's already in your name. The room tilted. She heard the words. She understood the words. Each one alone made sense. Debt, paid, house, yours. But strung together like that, they meant something so enormous that her mind just refused. It was like being handed the moon and told to put it in your pocket. Why, she said. Barely a word, because no, her voice cracked. Don't do the thing where you're kind so I owe you. I know that thing. Everybody who's ever helped me wanted something. The shelter wanted my paperwork. The church wanted my Sundays. What do you want? And he looked at her for a long moment. Because you did the impossible, he said finally. I got wet. That's not impossible. That's just cold. Listen to me. He leaned in, and his voice dropped to that low place again. The place that made the hair on her arms stand up. I was shot last night with depleted uranium rounds, made specifically to paralyze my kind. I was drowning, in freezing water. I had gone into what we call a death sleep. Regenerative stasis, a tomb the body builds around itself. He let that sit. Human blood cannot wake a vampire king from a death sleep, Delphine. It can't be done. Ordinary blood is water on a fire that's already out. His thumb traced the smooth skin of her forearm. Where the cut used to be. But yours, he said, was like swallowing the sun. She didn't breathe. It didn't just heal you. It rebuilt me. Nerve by nerve, seconds. Do you know your blood type? O negative, she whispered. I've given blood for the $20. It's O neg. No, he said, gentle. Almost sorry. You were misdiagnosed. Somewhere along the way. Probably on purpose, he watched her face. You have col null, the golden blood. Fewer than 50 people on this entire planet are walking around with it. To a hospital, it makes you the perfect donor. A universal gift, he paused. To my kind, he said, it makes you a legend, and Delphine Ward, who had spent 14 months being invisible, being stepped over, being the thing people looked away from on the sidewalk, sat very still, and felt the whole shape of her life bend into something she didn't recognize. There's more, she said, because she could feel it coming. There's a but. There's always a but. There's a but, he agreed. Say it. When I took your blood to heal you, he said, my venom entered your bloodstream. It's how the healing works. It's a trade. And it left a mark. What kind of mark? A signature, he said. A scent of a kind. But not one a nose can catch. It's biological. Klein and his men didn't track my car last night. They can't. It's armored against every sensor made. They tracked me. My signature. And now, he stopped. And she finished it for him. Because she was already there, and now I have it too, she said. Your signature. On me, on you, he said. In you. We're intertwined now. You broadcast me. I broadcast you. And the council factions. He shook his head slowly. They would burn armies to the ground for what's in your veins. And now they know exactly where to look. She stood up. She couldn't sit anymore. She wrapped the cashmere tight and walked to the middle of the huge, cold room and stood there, between the guns and the paintings. And she pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. And she thought about a lot of things very fast. She thought about her mother. She thought about the house in Ballard. She thought about $14 and a dead car and how she'd wake up cold every single morning for the rest of her life. And she thought about Odell, oh God. Odell. She spun around. There's an old man, she said. Back at the park. Odell Pruitt. Looks after me. Looked. He'll be out in the rain looking for my car and it won't be there and he's not your concern right now, don't? The word came out of her like a slap. Harder than she meant. But she didn't take it back. Don't you tell me what's my concern. That man handed me his own dinner last night. When he had nothing. You just bought a bank. He gave me everything he had. So don't you dare tell me he doesn't matter, and Corwin Vane. King of a world she didn't know existed. Went quiet. Something moved across his face. She couldn't read it. It might have been surprise. It had been a long time, maybe, since anyone had spoken to him like that. Since anyone had dared. You'd go back for him, he said. Into a city crawling with men who want to open your veins, Ains. For a homeless man with nothing to his name? Yes, without hesitating. I already told you, yes. He looked at her, and for just a second the king was gone. And what was left was just a very old, very tired man. Looking at something he'd forgotten existed. My people would call that a weakness, he said quietly. Then your people, she said, are cowards. The silence after that was very long, and then Corwin Vane did something she did not expect. He laughed, once, low, real, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. All right, he said, standing. All right, Delphine Ward, we'll get your old man. Except that was the exact moment the alarms should have gone off, and didn't because the lights just died. All of them. At once, the servers went dark. The hum stopped. The whole enormous room dropped into black. And then, a half-second later, red strobes slammed on, emergency lights, painting everything in pulses of blood-colored light. On, off, on, off. They bypassed the biometric firewall. Corwin snarled, and his voice had changed. Instantly, the man was gone, the king was back, and his eyes flooded crimson in the strobing dark. That's not possible, he said, half to himself. There are 9 people alive who could do that, and I trust 7 of them. Corwin, Klein didn't come alone this time. He was already moving, already pulling her behind him with one arm. He brought the Strigoi, the what? Vampire mercenaries, and from somewhere above them, up in the hangar, came a sound like the end of the world, an explosion, the blast doors. They didn't open. They came apart. A slab of titanium the size of a car door tore off its hinges and flew across the room and smashed into a wall of servers in a shower of sparks and screaming metal, and behind it came the smoke, white, choking, phosphorus, rolling in like a fog off a poisoned sea, and through the smoke they came. A dozen men in tactical gear, human, rifles up, boots pounding, and at their head a broad shape in a gas mask. Barrett Klein. She knew him by the voice before she saw the face. But it was the 4 behind Klein that stopped her heart, because they didn't move like the others. They moved like Corwin fast. Wrong. Blurred. 4 figures in black. Faces the color of spoiled milk. Eyes gone pure black, edge to edge. No white left at all, and their mouths hung open. Wet, eager, like dogs that had smelled meat. Well, well, Klein said. His voice buzzed and distorted through the mask. The king, and his new pet. Corwin said nothing. He just moved Delphine another step behind him, and she felt the muscles in his back go hard as stone. King, Klein said. Bag the girl. The council wants her alive, and then the room came apart. Corwin launched forward. She'd thought she understood how fast he was. From the lake, from the run through the woods, she had not understood anything. Because in the bunker in the strobing red light, with the smoke and the guns, Corwin Vane became a thing the eye could not hold. The human mercenaries opened fire, muzzle flashes strobed. The noise was a physical wall. It hit Delphine in the chest, and she dropped and pressed herself flat against cold concrete and jammed her hands over her ears, and it did nothing. The sound was inside her, everywhere, but Corwin didn't fall, because he wasn't there anymore. He was somewhere else. He was 6 places. He didn't shoot back. He didn't need to. He waded into the middle of the human line like a man walking into surf, and he took them apart with his hands. She'd remember pieces of it for the rest of her life. Never the whole, just pieces. His fist going through a tactical vest, like it was paper. A man lifted off the ground by the helmet and set down wrong. A body thrown across the room to fold around a support pillar, and she'd remember thinking. In the middle of all of it, one clear cold that scared her more than the guns. He isn't even angry, yet. Then the Strigoi hit him, 2 of them, from the sides. At the same instant, they came out of the smoke like something out of a nightmare and slammed into Corwin and drove him into a concrete pillar hard enough to crack it. And then they were on him, tearing, clawing, fangs snapping at his throat, trying to open the king the way the lake and the bullets had failed to. And Corwin roared. It wasn't a human sound. It came up out of the floor, out of the walls. It rattled her teeth in her skull. And he got one hand around the throat of the nearest Strigoi and lifted the thing clean off the ground and jammed a huge black pistol up under its jaw and fired. The gunshot swallowed every other sound. And where the Strigoi's head had been there, suddenly just nothing. Ash. And a slump of ruined black cloth falling to the floor. But there were 3 left, and while the king was busy with monsters, Klein came for the girl. She saw him coming. Through the smoke, Through the red pulses, he dropped his empty rifle and drew something long and serrated from his belt, and he came straight at her. Fast, for a human. Very fast. Delphine did the only thing she could. She grabbed the heavy cashmere blanket off the floor and flung it at his face. Which was stupid. Which she knew was stupid the instant it left her hands. He batted it aside without breaking stride. And then his hand was in her hair, twisting, yanking her back and up against him, and cold steel pressed flat against the side of her throat. Right over the pulse. Where the beat lived, hold it, Klein bellowed, and Corwin froze. He had a strigoi pinned under him, fist raised, and he stopped, mid-motion, because he'd seen the blade. He'd seen it against her skin, and the crimson eyes that had been all fury an instant ago went to a place beyond fury, to something still and white-hot and absolute. Let her go, Barrett, Corwin said. He didn't shout it. That was the terrible thing. His voice came out flat, level, and so cold that the temperature of the whole room seemed to drop. I'll give you 3 seconds, he said, to take that blade off her skin. You're in no position to negotiate, Your Majesty. Klein was backing away now, dragging her with him, toward the blown open hole where the blast doors used to be. The knife never left her throat. The Aegis Council sends their regards. I'm taking the golden blood. And you're going to stand right there and watch me do it. And Delphine, held against a killer, a blade at her throat. Watching the most dangerous thing she'd ever seen stand frozen because of her, felt something turn over inside her, because she was not the girl in the car anymore. She had dove into a lake that should have killed her. She had dragged 200 pounds of dead man up a hill. She had woken a king from the grave with a single drop of her blood, and now there was something in her veins that hummed. Some leftover heat from his venom, some borrowed strength she didn't understand but could feel. Coiled, ready, and more than any of that, she was Diane Ward's daughter. And Diane Ward's daughter did not freeze. She looked down. Klein was dragging her backward, and with every step he favored his right leg, barely, but she caught it. A hitch, a limp. An old injury he'd never let heal right. She stopped looking for a way out, and she started looking for that knee. Now, she told herself. Not when it's smart, not when it's safe. Now, while he thinks you're a rabbit. Now. She drove her heel down into the side of his knee, with every ounce of weight and rage, and 15 months of surviving that she had left. Something in Barrett Klein's leg gave way with a wet crunch. He howled, and the knife slipped. Just a fraction. Just off her skin, and a fraction was all a king needed. The air itself cracked. Corwin crossed the room faster than sound. She didn't see it. Nobody could have seen it. One instant, Klein had a knife at her throat. The next, Corwin's hand was wrapped around the mercenary's entire face, and his fingers digging into the skull, and he tore Klein backward off of her like ripping a weed from soft ground. He slammed the man down against the jagged, broken edge of the blast door frame once, and Barrett Klein stopped moving. He slid down the twisted metal and folded onto the floor and did not get up. Would never get up. Dead the instant he landed. The 3 remaining Strigoi looked at their dead commander, and they looked at the king standing over him, hands red, chest heaving, eyes burning like the mouth of a furnace, and they ran, they turned, and they vanished into the smoke. Gone, the contract not worth their skins, leaving nothing behind but bodies and ash and the crackle of burning wire. The bunker went quiet. Delphine stood in the middle of it, shaking. Adrenaline draining out of her all at once, and her legs stopped working. She started to fold. She never hit the ground. He was there. Corwin crossed to her in 2 strides and caught her. And this time he wasn't fast and terrible. He was careful. His huge hands were suddenly gentle in a way that made no sense on a body that had killed a room full of men 30 seconds ago. He pulled her hands away from her face. He tipped her chin. He looked at her throat, at the pulse, checking. Frantic under the calm, there was no cut. He let out a breath she hadn't known he was holding, and he pulled her against his chest, and she felt his arms close around her like a vault, like walls. Like the first safe thing in a very long time. You're safe, he said into her hair, fierce, almost angry with relief. I've got you, and Delphine Ward, who had not let herself be held in 14 months, because being held is how you break, buried her face in his shirt, and gripped the fabric in both fists, and did not break, but came close. They're going to keep coming, she said, muffled, against him. Aren't they? He pulled back just far enough to look at her. They are, he said. They didn't sleep. There was no time. And there was no going back to that bunker. Corwin moved them within the hour, to a second place, a townhouse on Capitol Hill with blacked-out windows and a steel core hidden inside brick. One of dozens, he said. He had them all over the city. A man who has lived long enough learns to keep doors he can vanish through. And that was where the news about the old man came in, because Corwin's people found him first. Callahan, a name, a smooth voice on the other end of phones, a man she never once saw. And what Callahan found made Corwin go very still. Say that. Again, Corwin said into the phone. He was standing at the window, looking out at nothing, and Delphine watched his back go rigid. When, he said. A pause. Who has him? And Delphine was on her feet. Who has who? She said. Corwin. Who has who? He lowered the phone, and he turned, and she knew before he said it. She knew from his face. Odell, Corwin said. Klein's people took him. Last night. In the hours after your car went missing. They pulled him out from under the picnic shelter while he was standing there in the rain, calling your name. The room went white at the edges. Why? She whispered. He's nobody. He's an old man with bad knees. Why would they? Because he's yours, Corwin said. Quiet, and she heard the thing under the words. The old, tired truth of it. In my world, that's all it takes. They couldn't find you, so they took what they knew you'd come back for. He's leverage, he's bait. And Delphine's, he stopped. There's an Argenta with bait and Delphine Ward, who had lost her mother, her house, her car, everything. Felt the last thing she had left dangling over a cliff. Then we go get him, and she said, Delphine, we go get him. You said we would. You looked at me and you said, all right, Delphine Ward, we'll get your old man. You said it. That was before I knew who was holding him. Then tell me who's holding him, she snapped. Tell me the truth, all of it. No more feeding it to a spoonful at a time. Who wants my blood, and who has my old man? Right now. And Corwin Vane looked at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time, he told her the truth. All of it. Klein worked for a man, he said. Klein's dead now. But the man he worked for is not. His name is Silas Hargrove. And for 140 years, Silas Hargrove was my most trusted advisor, my friend. The one voice in 4 centuries I never questioned. She sat down slowly. He built my defenses, Corwin said. He knows my every safe house, my every code. He designed the biometric locks Klein bypassed last night. Because Silas has the keys. He's always had the keys. And now he's using them. Why? She said. Why would he turn on you? Because Silas has spent a century chasing one thing, Corwin said. A way to make our kind truly immortal. Not what we are now. We can be killed. Fire. Certain rounds, the right blade. We are hard to kill, but we can die. And Silas found that intolerable. He wanted a bloodline that could not be ended. A perfect, unkillable strain. He looked at her, and to build it, he said, he needs one thing he has never been able to find. A source. A living, renewing source of golden blood. The room was silent. He's been looking for 50 years, Corwin said. For a golden blood human he could take alive. He never found one. A pause. Because someone hid the only one that mattered. Very, very well. And something cold walked up Delphine's spine. The bills, she whispered. My mother's bills, you said. In the bunker you started to say a secret organization was paying to track me. That wasn't the council. That was... I don't know yet, Corwin said honestly. But someone has been watching you your whole life, Delphine. Someone paid to keep eyes on you. And someone, somewhere, made sure a hospital wrote O negative on your chart instead of the truth. Someone was hiding you. Even while they were bleeding your family dry, who? She breathed. That, Corwin said, is the question that's going to get us both killed. And it's the exact question waiting for us in the same building where Silas Hargrove is holding your old man. She stood up. Then that's where we're going. She said, Delphin, Corwin, and she crossed to him, and she put a hand flat on his chest. Over the heartbeat, her own blood had restarted. And she looked up into those ancient amber eyes, and she was not afraid of them anymore. You spent 140 years trusting a man who was lying to you the whole time. I spent 22 years being lied to about the blood in my own body. We are the 2 most lied to people in this entire city. So I think it's time we walked into that building and started asking for the truth. Don't you? And Corwin Vane, king of a world she had known about for less than a day, looked down at the small, fierce girl with her hand on his chest, and in 140 years of betrayal and blood and cold immortality, something in the frozen center of him cracked, just a little, and let the light in. You, he said quietly, are going to be the death of me. I already was, she said. Last night, you should have stayed dead. You had your chance, and this time when he laughed, it wasn't surprised. It was the laugh of a man who has been alone for a very long time and has just realized, against every rule he ever made for himself, that he no longer is. They went that night. Silas Hargrove kept his work in a place that had no business existing. A cold storage facility on the industrial fringe of the city, down by the water, where the freight trains ran and nobody looked twice. Concrete. Windowless. A meat locker for the whole world to walk past and never notice. Except it wasn't meat inside. Corwin got them in through a service tunnel he'd built himself. Decades before, back when Silas had helped him draw the plans. Which was the poison in the whole thing. Every door Corwin knew, Silas knew too. Every secret was shared. They moved through the dark like two thoughts in the same tired head. And in a holding room, behind a steel door, they found Odell. He was tied to a chair. He was bruised, one eye swollen half shut. His gray beard crusted dark on one side. But he was alive. He was breathing. And when the door opened and he saw who came through it, the old man's split lip pulled back over the gap in his teeth in something that was trying very hard to be a grin. "There she is," Odell rasped. "There's my girl." And Delphine Ward crossed that room and dropped to her knees in front of the old man, who had given her his dinner in the rain, and she pressed her forehead to his. And for the second time in as many days, she came very close to breaking and did not. "You look terrible," she whispered. "You should see the other guy," Odell said. "Actually, you shouldn't." "Kid, he stopped. His good eye went past her, to the mountain of a man filling the doorway, to the amber eyes. And whatever Odell Pruitt had lived through in 70 years, he had never seen anything like Corwin Vane, and it showed on his beaten face. "Delphine," he said carefully. "Who's your friend?" And that was when Delphine started working the knots at his wrists. And that was when Odell Pruitt said the thing that changed everything. Because his good eye had drifted to Corwin. And it had gone strange. Not afraid. Something else. Something like a memory surfacing through deep water. "I know that face," Odell said slowly. Corwin went still in the doorway. "No," Corwin said. "You don't. We've never met, old man. I'd remember. Not you." Odell shook his head, wincing. "Not you, but that kind of face. That not quite right stillness. I've seen it before." Long time ago, his good eye swung back to Delphine, and his voice dropped. And there was something in it now that frightened her more than the knife had, because it was tender. And it was terrified. "Kid, that blood they keep talking about, that gold blood, your mama had it too, didn't she?" Delphine's hand stopped on the ropes. "What?" she said. "Diane," Odell said. Her mother's name in this old man's mouth. "Here, in this place. I knew your mama, Delphine, long before you. Long before Ballard. And she wasn't just some sick woman the bills came for," his good eye filled. "Your mama was running, kid. Her whole life. She was running from these exact people. And she ran for over 20 years. And you know why she finally stopped?" "Delphine couldn't speak, because of you," Odell said. "Because you can't run and raise a baby right. So she stopped. She dug in a little house in Ballard, and she prayed they'd never find her. The tears filled over into the crusted beard, and Delphine, honey, that cancer that took her," he shook his head slowly. "I never believed it, not for one day. Your mama was the healthiest woman I ever knew. Right up until the exact year they finally tracked her down, the cold storage facility hummed around them. And Delphine Ward knelt on a concrete floor, between the old man who'd fed her and the king who'd bitten her. And she understood, all at once, in the marrow of her golden bones, that her mother had not died of cancer, that her mother had died of them. And somewhere above them, deeper in the building, behind another steel door, a man who had waited 50 years, for exactly this moment felt two familiar biological signatures walk into his trap, and Silas Hargrove smiled. The knots came loose in Delphine's hands. And it didn't matter, because the steel door behind them sealed with a sound like a bank vault, swallowing a promise. A deep, hydraulic thunk that she felt in her chest. And every light in the room went hard and white and clinical, and always came out of the walls, everywhere at once, smooth, patient. A voice that had waited 50 years, and could afford to wait a little more. "Corwin," the voice said. "Old friend. You always did when someone called your name?" Corwin turned towards the speaker in the ceiling, and his whole body changed, not to the crimson fury she'd seen in the bunker. "Something worse. Something quiet, Silas," he said. "You brought her?" Silas Hargrove said, delighted, almost tender. "You actually brought her to me. 140 years, Corwin, and you never once made this easy. And now, at the end. You carry the prize through my front door yourself, Let the old man go, Corwin said. This is between you and me? No, and for the first time the smooth voice sharpened. No, it stopped being between you and me a long time ago. It became about the future. And you were never willing to reach for it. The white lights pulsed once, and a section of the far wall slid open, and Silas Hargrove walked into the room. He was not what Delphine expected. Not a monster. Not a giant like Corwin. He was slight, silver-haired. He wore a gray cardigan, of all things, like a man about to grade papers, and his eyes were a pale, colorless blue, kind eyes, grandfather eyes, which was, she understood immediately, the most terrifying thing about him, because kind eyes on a man who kills is the worst thing there is. Hello? Delphine, Silas said, and he smiled at her the way a man smiles at a package he's been tracking for weeks. Do you know? I've been looking at you for a very long time. The bills, she said. Her voice didn't shake. She made sure of that. The hospital. That was you. That was me. He clasped his hands, pleased she'd figured it out. You have no idea the resources it takes to hide a golden blood child in plain sight for 2 decades. Just to rub a chart, to keep a hospital honest, to watch, always watch, and never, ever let the wrong people notice. You were hiding me, she said. I was saving you. You bled my family dry. I kept you breathing, Silas snapped. And there it was, the first crack, pale eyes flashing. Do you know what the council would have done to you at 6 years old if they'd found you? What they'd have done to that mother of yours? I gave you 22 years of life, girl. I only ever asked for one thing in return, her blood, Corwin said. Her existence, Silas corrected, which comes to the same thing in the end, and Delphine's hands, still resting on Odell's shoulder, went cold. You killed my mother, she said. The room held its breath. Diane, Silas said. And something almost like grief crossed the kind old face, and that was the worst part, that he meant it. Diane was a mistake I made. She was supposed to hand you over when you were old enough to survive the process. That was the arrangement. Her life, her freedom, in exchange for you. When the time came, he spread his and when the time came, she said no. She ran, again, with you, and I could not allow the asset to disappear. The asset, Delphine repeated. You, say her name, Delphine said. Say my mother's name and then say what you did to her. Out loud. Look at me and say it. And Silas Hargrove looked at her. I gave Diane Ward a cancer that does not exist in any medical textbook, he said. Flat. Final. And I watched a hospital in this city bill her into the street for a disease I designed, and I let it run 3 years. Because I needed you old enough, and I needed you desperate, and I needed you alone. He smiled again, gently. And here you are, old enough, desperate, and alone. Right on schedule, the White Room roared in Delphine's ears because everything, every single thing, the bills, the house, the dead car, the $14, the freezing nights, her mother's slow, terrible dying in a bed at Virginia Mason, all of it, every cold hour of the worst 2 years of her life had been designed by the grandfather in the cardigan to break her down into a shape he could pick up. And Delphine Ward, 22 years old, stood up off the floor, Corwin said. She didn't take her eyes off Silas. That thing you told me about my blood in the bunker. There's a part you didn't finish, isn't there? Corwin went very still. Delphine, you said golden blood in small amounts brings your kind back to life. You showed me that yourself. On the shore, she took a step toward Silas, but you stopped there, like you always stop, a spoonful at a time, so finish it. What does a lot of it do? And it was Silas who answered, because Silas could not help himself, because a man who has waited 50 years to be proven right cannot resist saying the thing out loud. A large enough dose, Silas said softly, is the only substance on Earth that can unmake us completely. Not fire, not uranium, not the oldest blade, those kill the body. His pale eyes gleamed. Golden blood in volume unmakes the thing itself. It is the one perfect poison, which is precisely why it is also the one perfect key. The same blood that can end a vampire forever. Can, refined correctly. Make one that never ends, he gestured. And behind him, through the open wall, she saw it. The thing he'd spent a century building. A machine. Glass and steel and cold blue light. A chair in the center of it, with straps and needles, and a bank of empty vials waiting to be filled with her. It only takes one full extraction, Silas said gently. You won't survive it, of course. The process is total. But your death, Delphine, will be the birth of a bloodline that outlives the sun. Your mother died for nothing, you. You get to die for everything. And that was when Odell Pruitt moved, because everyone had forgotten the old man. Everyone always forgets the old man. He'd worked one hand free while Silas talked, and on the little table beside the chair within reach was the serrated knife they'd used on him. And Odell Pruitt, 70 years old, one eye swollen shut, bad knees. A man who had lost everything a man can lose and had exactly one thing left in this world worth fighting for, got his hand around that knife and came up out of the chair with a roar that had 30 years of engine grease and one old apprenticeship and a whole life of watching good people get ground down inside it. Adele. No, he didn't go for Silas. He knew he couldn't reach Silas. He was old and he was slow, and the thing in the cardigan would blur out of the way. Odell Pruitt was not a fool. Odell Pruitt had run a garage for 30 years, and he understood exactly one thing better than anyone in that room. He understood how to jam a machine. He threw himself at the extraction rig. He drove that serrated knife into the guts of it, into the glass, into the coils, into the cold blue heart of the thing Silas had spent 100 years building. And sparks went up in a fountain, and something inside it screamed, and blue light spat and died. No! Silas shrieked, and he blurred. He crossed the room faster than Delphine's eyes could follow, and his slight silver-haired body hit Odell like a truck. And there was a sound Delphine would hear for the rest of her life, a single, wet final sound. And Odell Pruitt slid down the ruined machine he had just destroyed, and did not get up. Delphine was across the room before she knew she was moving. She hit the floor beside him. She got her hands on him, and the old man's good eye found her face, and there was so much blood, too much, and she pressed her hands against it like she could hold his whole life inside his body with her palms. No, she said. No. Look at me. You don't get to do this. You don't get to, kid. A whisper, bubbling. Kid, listen. Don't talk, save it. We're getting you out. Corwin's going to. Delphine, and the old man's bloody hand came up, and it cupped her cheek. The way a father does. The way she had not been touched by a father since before she could remember having one. You listen to old Odell now. One last time she couldn't breathe. Your mama, he said, ran her whole life so you could have yours. His good eye was already going soft. Going far. Don't you spend it running too. You hear me? You've got something in you worth more than gold. And it ain't the blood, he smiled, the gap in his teeth. One last time. It's that you jumped in that lake for a stranger. Nobody made you, you just did, Odell. Please, live tender, kid, Odell Pruitt whispered. The world's got enough heart in it. And the old man's hand slid down off her cheek, and Odell Pruitt, who had given a homeless girl his dinner in the rain, who had called a parking lot his summer home, who had lost everything and stayed kind anyway, was gone, and the room went silent. And into that silence, Silas Hargrove said the last words he would ever say as a confident man. A pity, he said, brushing at his cardigan. The machine is repairable. It'll take a week. But you, my dear, aren't going anywhere in a week. So really the old fool only bought you 7 da. He stopped, because Delphine Ward had gone very quiet. And it is a specific kind of quiet. The quiet that comes over a person right before everything the world did to them comes back the other direction. Corwin knew that quiet. He'd worn it himself centuries ago, and even he took a step back from it. Delphine stood up. She stood up out of Odell's blood, and she looked down at her own hands, red with the old man's life, and she remembered the shore, the lake, one drop of her blood on Corwin's pale lips, and how it had absorbed. Like dry ground drinking rain, and she remembered what Silas had just told her, the one perfect poison. She raised her eyes to Silas Hargrove. You said, she began, and her voice was not the voice of the girl in the car. It was low, and it was steady, and it was ancient in a way that made even a 140-year-old king's skin crawl. You said, a large enough dose unmakes you completely. Silas's kind eyes flickered. You said it's the one thing that can end you forever. She took a step toward him. Not fire, not uranium, not a blade. Me. A lot of me, Corson, Silas said. Backing up now, the confidence draining out of the cardigan. Corwin, stop her. She doesn't understand what she understands perfectly, Corwin said quietly. That's what you never planned for, Silas. You built a machine to take it out of her a needle at a time. Under control. On your terms. The king's amber eyes glittered. It never once occurred to you that she'd give it freely, and that was the thing Silas Hargrove had no answer for, because a man who has spent 50 years learning to take cannot understand a girl who chooses to give. Delphine looked down at her hands, slick with Odell's blood, and with her own, because somewhere in the fight to reach him she'd torn her palm open on the wreckage of the machine and hadn't even felt it. her blood and the old man's mixed together on her skin. Gold and grief. And she looked at the ruined extraction rig. Odell hadn't destroyed it, he'd opened it. He'd cracked the whole cold blue heart of it wide open. The coils, the intake, the refinement chamber where Silas meant to turn her death into an empire. All of it was exposed, waiting, thirsty. And Delphine Ward understood the last thing she needed to understand, that the machine built to weaponize her could be turned around. Delphine, Corwin's voice, sharp, because he saw it too. Delphine, that will pull everything out of you, everything. It won't stop the vial. It's broken. It'll take all of it. It'll take you. She looked at him, and for one long moment, in a white room full of blood and machines and the body of a good old man, the girl from the lake and the king from the grave looked at each other. And a whole life that might have been passed between them. Wordless. I know, she said softly. No. He was moving toward her. No, not for this, not for him. Delphine, I will burn this whole world down before I let you. That's the difference between us, she said. And she smiled at him, sad and gentle, and it broke his ancient heart clean in half. You'd burn the world to save one person. I'd give one person to save the world, she looked at Silas, at the machine, at the empire of unkillable monsters he wanted to build out of her body. Somebody has to make sure he never gets this, ever, not from me, not from anyone, ever again, and she stepped toward the broken machine, and she raised her bleeding hand over its exposed and thirsty heart. Delphine, please live tender, she whispered, to herself, to Corwin, to the old man on the floor. The world's got enough heart in it, and she pressed her open palm into the ruined machine, and the world came apart in gold because Silas had to build the extraction rig to want her blood, to pull it, to crave it, and now it was broken open and she was giving it, freely, all at once, and the machine did not know how to stop. It only knew how to take. Golden light exploded up out of the wreckage. Not electric, not fire, something older, something that had no business existing in the modern world. Her blood ran down into the coils, and the machine convulsed, and the golden light flooded up the intake lines and into the refinement chamber, into every vial and every pipe and every cold blue corner of the thing Silas Hargrove had spent a century building. And Silas Hargrove screamed, because the machine was connected to him, because of course it was. He'd wired himself into it. He was going to be the first of the unkillable line, the prototype, the god. He'd plugged his own ancient body into the heart of the machine so that when it filled with golden blood, he'd be the one it filled. And now it was filling, with a lethal dose, given freely, the one perfect poison. In volume, pouring into the one man on earth who'd wired himself to receive it. No! Silas shrieked, clawing at the cables. No! This was supposed to. You don't understand what I was building. I understand, Delphine said. Soft, fading, her knees going. The gold light pouring out of her and into the machine and into him. You were building a world with no way out. And I just gave everyone the door, and Silas Hargrove, who had waited 50 years, who had killed a mother and hollowed out a daughter and murdered a kind old man in a cardigan-wearing grandfather's disguise, came apart, not in fire, not in blood, in gold. The light that should have made him immortal unmade him instead. It went into his ancient body, and it undid every thread of whatever it was that let him keep walking through the centuries. And he did not die like a man. He did not even die like the Strigoi. He simply unraveled, thread by golden thread, until there was nothing left in the cardigan at all. Not even ash, just an empty gray sweater, sliding down to the floor, beside the machine, beside the old man, beside the girl, because Delphine Ward was falling too. The machine had taken too much. Just like Corwin said it would. It had opened her up and pulled the gright out of her. It had not stopped at what was needed to kill Silas. It had kept taking. Because it was broken. Because that was the whole terrible point. And she went down. She never hit the floor. He was there. Of course he was there. He'd crossed the room the instant she started to fall, faster than sound, faster than grief. And he caught her. And this time there was nothing careful about it. There was only a 400-year-old man on his knees in the fading gold light, holding the only warm thing left in his long, cold life. No, Corwin said. And the king was gone. All the way gone. No, you don't get to do this. Do you hear me? I forbid it. I am the king of this entire world and I forbid it, bossy, she whispered. For a dead guy, Delphine. His voice broke on her name. Stay. Please, I'll give you anything. The house. A new life. I'll tear the council apart with my hands. I'll Corwin. Her hand found his face. The way Odell's had found hers. Do. The thing, what thing? The thing you did on the shore. Her eyes were going soft, going far. Your venom, it healed me once. A drop of my blood woke you up. So, a ghost of a smile. So maybe we're not done trading yet. And Corwin Vane went very still. Because she was right. Because it had never once occurred to him. He'd been so busy watching her die that he'd forgotten the one thing he was. The one thing his blood could do. His venom had knit her arm shut in the freezing rain in seconds. It could rebuild flesh, restart a stopped machine. And what was a girl but a stopped machine? It's never been done, he said. Delphine, if I give you enough venom to bring you back from this, it won't just heal you, it'll change you. You won't be entirely human. She breathed the word out, almost laughing. Corwin, look at me. Look what human got me. Her hand slid weakly against his jaw. I jumped in that lake as a girl who had nothing to lose. Give me something to keep. And Corwin Vane, king of a world she'd known about for 2 days, bent his head to the wrist of the girl who had woken him from the grave. And this time, he was the one who bled. He tore his own wrist open with his own fangs, and he pressed it to her lips, the way she heard her blood to his, a trade, the oldest trade there is, and he whispered to her the whole time, low, fierce, in a language older than the city, older than the country, older than anything with a name, he said. Drink, you impossible, infuriating, magnificent girl. Drink and stay, because I have been alone for 400 years, and I did not know it, until a homeless girl with $14 jumped into a freezing lake to save a stranger she'd never met, and showed me what I'd forgotten. Drink and stay, and on the floor of a cold storage facility, beside the body of a kind old man, and the empty gray cardigan of a monster, in the last of a fading golden light, Delphine Ward drank. She woke to warmth. That was the first thing. The first thing in as long as she could remember. She woke and she was warm, all the way through. No thin blankets, no 2-inch gap in a car, no December leaking into her bones, just warmth and soft light and the smell of the sea. She was in a bed, a real bed, in a room with tall windows looking out over gray water and green islands. And for one long moment she just lay there, and she breathed, and she noticed that breathing felt different now. Slower, deeper, like her body had all the time in the world, because it did. She sat and she saw him, Corwin, in a chair by the window, watching the water, or pretending to. And when she stirred, he turned, and the look on his face was one she would spend a very long time getting used to. Because it was not the face of a king, it was the face of a man who had been afraid. And was not, anymore. How long, she said. Her voice was steadier than it had ever been. 3 days, she looked at her hands. They looked the same. And they didn't. There was a stillness in them now, a quiet strength she could feel humming just under the skin. Odell, she said, and the warmth in the room dimmed a little. Because some things even a king can't fix. I buried him myself, Corwin said quietly, in the sun, somewhere green, with his name on a real stone, Odell Pruitt, and underneath it I had them carve the only words that seemed to fit. He paused. Live tender. And Delphine Ward put her face in her hands, and she cried, finally. For the first time since the spring, she cried for her mother, who ran for over 20 years, and she cried for Odell, who fed her when he had nothing and died naming a machine with a garage man's hands. And she cried for the girl in the car, who was gone now and was never coming back. And Corwin let her. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't fill the silence. He just came and sat on the edge of the bed and put one huge arm around her and let her be small against him for as long as she needed, which, it turned out, was a very long time. And he had nothing but time, and when she was done, she wiped her eyes. And she looked out at the gray water, and she asked the question that mattered. The council, she said, the ones who paid Clayine, who wanted my blood. Silas is gone, but they're still out there, aren't they? They are, Corwin said. Then it's not over. No, he looked at her, and there was something new in his amber eyes now. Not fear, not the old cold weariness. Something that had not been there in 400 years. It's not over. Which brings me to a question I never in my long life expected to ask anyone. She turned to face him. I can make you disappear, he said. And she recognized it, the offer. The same shape as the one he'd almost made in the bunker. I can give you the house in Ballard. A new name. Enough money that you never feel cold again. I can put you somewhere the council will never find you. You've done enough. More than enough. You can walk out that door right now and live 100 quiet years and never see me again. He paused. Or, she said, or you stay, and his voice dropped. And there was the whole weight of centuries in it, and under the centuries, something young and terrified and hopeful. You stand beside me, and together we find every last member of that council who put a price on your head and on your mother's. And we make sure that what happened to Diane Ward and to Odell Pruitt never happens to anyone's mother or anyone's old man ever again. He took her hand. But if you stay, he said, understand what you're staying for. Not a quiet life, not a safe one, a long one. A war. He looked at her. The girl in the car had nothing to lose. You have everything now. So I won't blame you if you take the door. And Delphine Ward, who was not entirely a girl anymore, and not entirely human anymore, and not by any measure the frightened thing that had shivered in a dead car 4 days and a whole lifetime ago, looked at the king who had bled for her, on the floor, in the gold, beside the body of the old man who taught her the only thing worth knowing, live tender. The world's got enough hard in it. And she thought about tender, and she thought about hard. And she understood at last that they were not opposites. That the tenderest thing a person can do, sometimes, is stand between the hard and the ones who can't take it. That was what her mother did. For over 20 years, that was what Odell did, with a garage man's knife. And that, Delphine Ward decided, was a thing worth becoming immortal for. She reached up, and she threaded her fingers into his dark hair, the way she had in a hollow tree, in a story she barely recognized as her own life, and she pulled his face down toward hers, and she stopped just short of his lips. You should know, she whispered. I don't run, I've noticed, he said. My mother ran her whole life. And it still found her. Her thumb traced his jaw. So I'm done running from them. From this, she looked into the amber eyes. From you, then what, Corwin said, barely breathing, for a man who technically didn't have to. What do you want to do? And Delphine Ward smiled. And it was not the smile of a victim. It was not even the smile of a survivor. It was the smile of something new. Something the council, in all their centuries of hoarding gold and paying killers and grinding down the small and the poor and the invisible, had never once seen coming. I want to find them, she said. All of them. Every last one who sent a man to a lake with a rifle, who wrote a fake word on a sick woman's chart, who took an old man out from under a picnic shelter in the rain. Her golden eyes did not waver. I want to find them, and I want them to learn my name. And what, Corwin whispered, is your name? She pulled his lips down to hers, Delphine Ward. She said against his mouth, daughter of Diane. And I am done being hunted, and she kissed him. And outside the tall windows, the gray Seattle mist finally broke, and a thin line of gold came up over the islands. The first real sunrise in a long, cold winter, falling warm across a bed, and a king, and a girl who used to have nothing to lose, and who now had everything, and every intention of keeping it far away, in a room paneled in old wood and older secrets. A dozen figures sat around a long table. That Silas Hargrove was gone. That the machine was destroyed, that the golden blood girl had not only survived, but had turned, and was now standing beside the one king they had all spent a century learning to fear, and at the head of the table a single figure folded their hands, and considered the empty chair where Hargrove used to sit, and did not look afraid, only patient. So, this figure said quietly, to the room, to the dark. The girl thinks it's over, a long pause. Let her think so. For now, and somewhere in a warm bed by the gray water, Delphine Ward, who had learned to live tender in a hard world, slept without shivering for the first time in her life, not knowing that the longest night of all was still to come.